Not every sound you let into your ears is empty. Some of it is carrying something, and most of us never stop to ask what. You get in the car, you turn the volume up, you let a melody wash over you for hours a day, and you never once ask what that melody is quietly training your spirit to accept. There is a conversation the church almost never has out loud, so we are going to have it right now. Why does that door stay shut so often? 6 kinds of music that do not just entertain you. They open a door, and once that door is open, something tends to walk through it. Scripture has never treated a song as a neutral thing. In 1 Samuel 16:23, whenever a tormenting spirit came over King Saul, David picked up his harp, and the record tells us that spirit lifted the moment the music began. That was not a coincidence. That was a demonstration. Sound moves spirits. It moved one that day for the better, and it hasn't stopped moving them since. Colossians 3:16 tells believers to let the word of Christ dwell in them richly, as they sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to one another. Notice what that verse assumes. It assumes the song itself carries the word, or it does not. There is no such thing as a song that carries nothing. Every one of them is either building something in you or hollowing something out. So let us walk through the 6. 1. Music that dresses darkness up and hands it a microphone. Not a genre, a content. Lyrics that celebrate what should be mourned, that flirt with what should be feared, that turn evil into a costume you wear proudly, instead of a wound you grieve. I think of a musician I once shared a green room with, years before either of us knew where our paths were headed. He was gifted, generous with strangers, the kind of man you would trust with your car keys. But the project he was building his name around was soaked in imagery that mocked everything sacred, imagery of ruin dressed up as art. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. He said it was just theater, that nobody actually believed the words they screamed on stage, and that it wasn't that deep. But belief was never the test Scripture applies. 1 Corinthians 10:20-21 says plainly that what pagans offer, they offer to demons, not to God, and that we are not meant to be partners with that table. You cannot share the Lord's cup and a demon's cup in the same hand. Here is the mechanism nobody explains to you. What you rehearse with your mouth does not stay in your mouth. It moves in. A lyric said once is a thought. A lyric said 1,000 times on repeat is furniture. It moves into the room and it sits down, and eventually you stop noticing it is there at all. 2. This one turns a human being into an object to be used. And it is the type almost nobody in church wants to talk about, because it is everywhere, and because it is catchy, and because admitting the problem means admitting your own playlist. I remember talking with a young father in our fellowship who could not understand why intimacy in his marriage felt hollow. He loved his wife. He was not chasing anyone else. But when I asked what filled his ears on his commute, on his workout, in the quiet moments before bed, the answer was hours a week of lyrics that treated a woman's body as a trophy and a conquest as a punchline. He told me the words didn't really register anymore, that it was just rhythm at that point. But rhythm without conviction still leaves a residue. Matthew 5:28 puts it this way: everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So a single glance already carries that much spiritual weight. What then does an hour of lyrics built entirely around that glance, played on repeat for years, actually plant inside somebody? Philippians 4:8 gives believers the filter. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, think on these things. Not tolerate, not ignore. Think on them, because whatever occupies your thinking eventually occupies your living. 3. Music that turns cruelty into a punchline. This one is dangerous precisely because it hides behind the word edgy. I sat once in a friend's apartment while a track played that treated violence against another human being as a clever line, delivered with a grin, and what unsettled me was not the lyric itself. It was that not one person in that room reacted. Nobody winced. The room had been trained, one play at a time, to stop flinching. That is always how it works. Not the first hearing, the 100th, when the shock has worn smooth and the conscience has gone quiet. Psalm 11:5 tells us the Lord examines the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. Notice the wording. not merely the one who commits violence, the one who loves it, who finds it entertaining. Proverbs 4:23 tells us to guard our hearts above everything else we guard, because everything we do flows out from there. A heart that has been taught to laugh at cruelty will eventually find cruelty easier to overlook when it shows up somewhere other than a song. If any of the first three have already made you think of a song sitting in your own library right now, type it in the comments as a single line. Lord, search what I have been calling harmless. Keep this in mind as we move forward, because the next three categories are the ones that rarely get named out loud. 4. Some music turns defiance into an identity you get to wear. Not frustration set to a beat. That is human, that is honest. What is different here is a sound that teaches you to treat every authority over you as an enemy to be mocked, parents, government, even God, and makes the mocking sound like courage. I knew a young man raised on Sunday school verses who slowly began quoting a different scripture altogether, lines lifted straight from his headphones, about answering to no one and owing nothing to anybody. His family noticed the change in his conversation long before they understood where it had come from. It had come from repetition. Romans 13:1-2 does not soften this at all. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. Put plainly, resisting the authority God allowed to stand is resisting the one who put it there. Music that romances lawlessness is not simply venting. It is discipleship in the opposite direction, one chorus at a time, training you to crown as heroic exactly what heaven calls rebellion. 5. Music built to alter your state rather than simply move your feet. This is not about a dark lyric. Some of it has no lyric at all. This is sound engineered through repetition and chant to open you up to something beyond entertainment. I sat once through what a friend called a sound bath. No words, only layered tones and a whispered instruction to release control and let something in. She said she felt lighter afterward, more at peace, and she didn't understand why I looked concerned. But peace is not proof of who put it there. 2 Corinthians 11:14 warns us plainly. Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Long before that, Deuteronomy 18:10-11 had already forbidden believers from turning to divination, sorcery, or consulting spirits, and trance built on repetition has been a doorway into altered states across nearly every culture that ever practiced it. Long before wellness culture gave it a gentler name. Calm is not the same thing as holy. Test what is behind the sound, not merely how the sound makes you feel. 6. The last type quietly becomes the thing you run to instead of God, and it is the hardest one to catch, because it never looks like sin. It looks like coping. I think of a widow in our congregation who lost her husband suddenly, and in the months after, one artist's albums became the only companion that felt like it truly grasped her grief. The first sound she reached for at sunrise, the last sound before sleep. Over time, I noticed the order had quietly reversed. Headphones came before prayer. The song had become first responder, and scripture had become an afterthought. I want to be careful here, because even worship music can be misused this way if it becomes the destination instead of the road. The danger was never the music itself. It was what the music had quietly taken the place of. Psalm 42:11 puts the question every grieving heart has to face honestly. Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God. When any song, even a beautiful one, turns into the first place your soul runs whenever it needs comfort, identity, or a way to escape, that song has slipped into a chair reserved for exactly one occupant, and it was never meant to sit there. Before we close, I want to be clear about something. None of this is an argument against music. God invented sound. He commanded his people to sing, to build instruments, to make noise before him without apology. Music is one of the most beautiful gifts he ever handed the human race. A language that can carry his presence in a way almost nothing else can. Nothing in this video was meant to shame every song you have ever loved. Most of you never sat down and consciously chose to let a lyric shape you. It happened the way water shapes stone, slowly, without asking permission. But now you know, and knowing changes what you are responsible for. Ephesians 5:19 gives us the better road, addressing one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord from the heart. Choose sound that builds instead of sound that erodes. Choose lyrics that carry you toward God instead of lyrics that quietly replace Him. Because He is not only listening to what plays through your headphones, He is watching what it slowly builds inside your heart. If anything in this message landed on you today, do one thing before you close this video. Drop a comment right now that simply says, "Father, examine my playlist." Make it personal, and if someone in your life needs to hear this too, pass it along to them tonight. It could quietly reshape what they allow past their own 2 ears for years to come. Hit subscribe so we keep unpacking truths like this one week after the next. Grace and peace to you, family. See you in the next one.